In a laboratory on Earth, two extremely powerful humanoid species were constructed for military applications. Their names were Blagunski and Zabumski. They were bioengineered to have the ability to absorb the brains of living creatures for energy via consumption from the tentacles on their faces. For as long as they keep feeding off brains, they will supply themselves with enough energy to live forever. However, the project was deemed to be unethical and thus was cancelled, leaving the scientists to resort to launching them into space to prevent them from destroying Earth. Blagunski and Zabumski, being able to preserve themselves through space, eventually landed on the planet Aquafine. They team up and start to absorb the brains of all creatures on the planet, growing stronger with each and every brain consumed. After 50 years of constant feeding off the creatures of the planet, Blagunski and Zabumski became total evolved specimens. This means that they have reached their full biological potential, giving them abilities such as flight, strength, regeneration, and most importantly, the ability to create life. They found that if they took chunks of their brain, the chunks would regenerate to lesser versions of themselves, resembling almost exactly like their human ancestors with human-like capabilities. They would call these creatures Kradons. Blagunski and Zabumski tested this life-creating ability, but didn't fully dedicate to life creation quite yet. After a few years, a space station known as the Solar System Sacrificer entered the solar system. The beings on the spacecraft were very religious and believed that there should never be any perfect beings, and that they were responsible for stopping any being from becoming perfect. When they recognized the potential of Blagunski and Zabumski, they initiated their planet destruction project, set for destroying Aquafine with Blagunski and Zabumski along with it. Though just before the planet was destroyed, Blagunski and Zabumski flew off Aquafine and toured the SSS. They destroyed the spacecraft, leaving it out of commission permanently. Being forced to leave Aquafine due to its destruction, they then left the solar system in search for another home. Blagunski and Zabumski landed on a new planet similar to their old one. Its name was Azarkina. They decided to part ways to use their life creation skills to make their own civilizations of Kradons. Blagunski would make his civilization of Kradons known as Piggles, and Zabumski would make his known as Oinkishash. The namesakes of these civilizations were because the Oinkishash and the Piggles were the two most abundant species on Azarkina, which they believed were above all other species, much like how they believed that they and all their people were above all other species as well. The Oinkishash and the Piggle both became very successful civilizations, though inevitably they would find each other. The generals of both civilizations would become aggressive against the other civilization. Thirsty for power, wars break out between the civilizations. Blagunski and Zabumski, who once were an unstoppable team, were now against each other. After 30 years of warfare, Blagunski and Zabumski decided to set aside their differences and join together to form an ultimate civilization. With a combination of the OS and the Piggle, they formed the OSP civilization. With nothing to stop or distract their reign, the OSP quickly dominated and urbanized the planet. The OSP became so extremely technologically advanced, Azarkina became completely uninhabitable due to the OSP draining it of its resources. Blagunski and Zabumski decided to ship their Kradons on massive space shuttles in search of a fresh new world to start on. While in these ships, the Kradons would all be preserved cryogenically and have their minds hosted within a simulation of their old Azarkinian world. The Kradons would have their memories of the past erased to ensure their safety as to prevent anyone from escaping the simulation and waking up from the cryogenic sleep. The ships would depart for a search of a new world. It had been nearly 5 years of utter peace. People are constructing new homes and living perfect lives. Their capital of the island was located not far off the shore of the northern side, along with a massive geode resting in the center of the map, showing the extensive history of the island. Though, throughout all of these 5 years, there was a group of people who have never forgot their past. These ones were known as the Above. They were tasked to keep the simulation stable and to keep everyone safe and happy. They had almost complete control over everything that could happen in the simulation due to their near unlimited access to the simulation's programs and coding. Society in the simulation had been perfected. Suddenly, a powerful heat wave blew over the map. The above were thrown off. The simulation was set to have a stable temperature. Why would the simulation glitch all of a sudden? And why now of all times? It had been 5 years of perfection. Regardless, the above completely restabilized the temperature in about a month. While this was happening, the people had developed more to the western city, along with the addition of more agricultural land. A new and small airport finished its construction as well. A loud noise begins to sound. The ground shakes over the island, followed by a massive ravine forming seemingly out of nowhere. The above were confused. Why were there suddenly these disasters occurring? Nobody out of the above ordered for there to be a natural disaster, and even if they did, why would they? Something was happening, something more than just a mere glitch in the code. Ravines cracked through the ground of the island, destroying part of the western city, southern drylands, and central plains. But with all of these crevices forming, the geode in the center began to crack slightly for the first time in all of its existence. The wind starts to pick up. The sky dimmed with the shade of gray. The clouds blocked out the sun. The wind grows stronger until the first one appears, a tornado. More tornadoes join, destroying everything in their path and leaving trails of destruction behind. The above discovered the source of the problem, the ASE. It stood for the Association of Simulation Escapists. They had somehow found out that they were trapped within a simulation and were desperate to get out of it. They managed to hack into the code of the simulation, allowing them to code in destruction across the island. The above did not fully understand their motives yet, but they had to stop them at all costs. Many places were completely destroyed, including the agricultural land in the west, all the way to the airplanes near the airport. Each tornado that passed left a path of destruction behind it. The temperatures plummet. A blizzard rushes in over the map. The island was smothered with snow and ice everywhere except for the very east of the island. Such a powerful ice storm brought amongst the island in such a quick amount of time. It was incredible what the ASE was doing. The above knew they were stronger than the ASE. They had to stop them before it was too late. The island rumbled once more like how it had done before. The ground started to collapse in some places, forming sinkholes scattered across the island. In a quick attempt, the above attempts to delete the ASE from the simulation, killing them in real life in the process. The above initiates the termination of the ASE. But nothing happens. The ASE was one step ahead. They had become invulnerable to the above's ability to delete. Buildings had collapsed, such as a beloved capital. Residual snow and ice lingered in the south still. Along with an island appearing in the west out of thin air, the ASE were experimenting with what they were capable of controlling in the simulation. The above, now completely unable to delete the ASE from the simulation, were forced to resort to other options in order to preserve the simulation. An airship appeared above the island, watching over. The ASE were hiding in places on the island. One of these was located in a southern bunker, but it couldn't just be the only place. A storm grew in the distance, yet this one was different. The ASE had not created this one, but rather the above did. They created the storm in an attempt to tear down where the ASE facility stood. It was the only way to attack the ASE facilities, because deleting them wasn't an option. The hurricane crashed through the island. The ice and snow in the southern portion of the island was completely gone. Though the hurricane spread debris amongst the island, it still wasn't enough. The ASE was still out there. The above proceeded to delete the random western island in an attempt to try to fix what the ASE was ruining. Though the above were not able to delete the ASE could not actually delete the above due to their immunity to deletion built deep within the code of the simulation. Two more of the above's airships appear over the island. Everything is going wrong for the above. It seemed like as they fix destruction, more follows. The ASE shoots down the above's airships. They then crash on the island, leading people to investigate and find cameras aboard. causing suspicion. If the people trapped within the simulation find out that the reality is fake, it may be the end of this civilization. The island goes without any natural disasters for once. Finally, the island was oddly quiet. Slowly, purple light cracks and glitches appear across the island. People everywhere started to become extremely suspicious of what was happening to their home. People started to truly believe that they were trapped inside a simulation. The above had become so desperate to fix the simulation, they would risk exposing the secret of the simulation to the public. The glitches grew and grew until they abruptly consumed the entire island. A bright white flash appeared, fading away to reveal the land around them. The above had fixed it. The island was removed of all of its destruction. The ever-expanding canyon in the east was returned to its normal condition. The trash piles were cleaned. Towns and a new baseball field were constructed. But most importantly, the ASC facilities were all deleted. The old bliss they experienced in the past 5 years returned once again. The bliss was short-lived. The ancient geode lying in the center of the island was almost completely cracked open. It was the one thing the above never fixed because of its history to the people. The geode shook and split open. It was revealed the ASC headquarters, all this time residing right under the above's noses. The above was more furious than they ever had been before. They struck first and attacked the ASC directly. A massive war broke out between the two powers, the ASC against the above. Both sides would fight until the very end. Numerous military bases were set up around the island. The ASC and the above fight relentlessly, battles after battles, but still no clear winner. Suddenly, sirens are heard across the island. First by the above, who had constructed special missiles with never-before-seen consequences. The ASC would soon follow up with missiles of their own. In a moment's notice, the missiles all collectively launched. The people looked closer. They were nuclear missiles. Everyone ran for cover. The end was here. The island was in destruction. Most of everything was completely destroyed. Craters from the missiles were scattered about, specifically the 5 craters from the 5 missiles the above made. These were special missiles, designed to leave a gooey blob-like residue behind. This residue was also extremely radioactive. Over time, these small bits of radiation blobs gather and combine, growing larger and larger. The ASC experiment on the massive anomalies that begin to be formed around the map. They secretly invented a device that, when armed, could cause these huge structures to explode all around the island. Radioactive blob-like structures form around the whole map as a result of the nuclear warfare. The ASC's plan to escape the simulation is to cause as much destruction to the island as possible. This is in hopes of waking everyone up in the process. The blob-like structures will inevitably blow up around the map, causing the craters of each explosion to generate a unique pattern in each location. The ASC's plan was beginning to be revealed to everyone, but the ASC still needed a good deal of time to get it perfect. This plan is the second chance that the ASC needed. The original plan with the ASC creating storms failed, but this second chance acts as a redemption. However, if it fails, it will most likely cost the ASC their lives. The gooey structures that were rigged with explosives are blown up, and chaos becomes abundant over the map. Interesting craters are made and explored by the residents of the island. The above finally thought that everyone and everything on the map has been restored to being calm and normal. Buildings are being constructed, and in the near future, it may become a massive city covering the entire island. Meanwhile, the ASC are working on a plan like no other. The plan to completely demolish the island using artificial storms failed. Now, they are creating a substance that will be released soon, and hopefully leave this simulation unstabilized. Workers begin construction of buildings that will become a well-stabilized city in the future. The above is finally relieved that they have beaten the ASC for good. The ASC continue to work on their plan to escape the simulation and free every person on the island. The time had come. The ASC released their secret project, the Glitch. It started to brew in the deepest parts of the map, turning all ravines into deadlands. The ASC's plan was in effect, hoping that this was the last thing that they would need to do to escape the simulation. The above were shocked. They knew almost for certain they had defeated the ASC. The craters around the map turned purple from the glitch. No matter how hard they tried, the above couldn't delete the glitch. They may have won the nuclear war, but it seems that the ASE were who won the real war. The glitch spreads even further. It cracks and splits apart the island, leaking the glitch around the island. The above try to calm the people, but in reality, they're the ones that are panicking the most. The island becomes less habitable by the hour. All the ASE needs to do is keep up the destruction. The glitch sends 3 massive cracks between the island pieces. At this point, the islands are basically uninhabitable. The ASC had done it. The simulation has finally been compromised. Nobody knew where they would end up. Not even the above really knew for sure. But all the ASC knew was that it must be better than being stuck in the simulation. At the last moment, a bright flash covers the sky. People are blinded, but look down to notice familiar soil. They were back before everything happened, before the start of the ASC. This blank landscape didn't even have a single sign of civilization. This backup the above loaded was from before any buildings were constructed. The above haven't won. They panicked, realizing that this backup of the island was only temporary. The clock was ticking. The day had come. The sky was turning bright once again, but this time it was promising. When everyone woke up, they weren't on the island. They all opened their cryogenic freezing simulation chambers. Fog covered the floor of the spaceship they were in. They all looked out the window, seeing the fleet of simulation ships amongst the stars. The people once trapped within the boundaries of the simulation are now trapped within the walls of the simulation ships. It wasn't what they expected, but they were still glad that they were not living fake lives. But not everyone was content with this fate. Knowing that their lives were lies drove some people mad. This anger, fear, and sadness took over some of the people's minds with a blinding rage. 2 simulation ships were destroyed by the peoples inside of them. The rest of the ships kept moving on. After the silence from the destruction of the 2 simulation ships came waiting. The simulation ships were programmed to head towards a habitable planet. All the people had to do was wait for the ships to arrive. One simulation ship got too close to the tail of the mothership, resulting in a minor crash for the mothership but a major crash for the simulation ship. The crashed simulation ship had ended with the death of everyone inside. It was clear that the people were getting impatient. This is it, their new home. They were approaching the planet that the simulation ships were heading towards. The planet was of perfect size, perfect conditions, and was uninhabited by no intelligent life. Its name was Ozarka. The ships started to enter the atmosphere. Bits and parts of the ships were breaking off and burning up. The ships were going to crash onto the surface of the planet. Suddenly, the ships struck the surface. Out of the 7 that crashed, 4 of them sunk into the water. Along with the ships, only 116 survived and 384 died from the estimated 500 people, leaving those that survived to see the new world. This is their new home, whether they liked it or not. The people started to build, colonize, and thrive on the new land. Relics from their past life scattered about the island, including the crashed mothership and 2 simulation ships along the island. The power source of the mothership, deemed the Cube of Independence, crashed separately on the southwestern shore of the island. It originally charged its power with energy from life sources, such as the bioreactors or very vibrant and energy-full plant life. Its power was running dry, sadly, representing the once abundant power that the Cradons had, now running empty and in need of repair. A thing the people noticed on the island that showed signs of life was the strange, sunken statue of a giant. It rested on top of a mountain and had the label of Voldir. The last glimmer of green from the Cube of Independence flickers, then fades away for good. Its power was completely empty. Three years later, things were going well for the people on the island. Many of the dense woods that smothered the landscape were cleared in preparation for the civilization to come. The debris of the broken ships in the water were all submerged, with the ones on the islands being recycled for construction. A laboratory was constructed around the resting place of the Cube of Independence. The peculiar statue rises out of the ground even more. The next generation of Cradon legacy was developing, being built off of success and joy. Suddenly and abruptly, the ground shakes. The statue, seemingly alive, rises out of the ground. Giant in stature, the statue was not just alive, it was the god of the Treq universe. Around his mountain rose his castle. His name was Voldir. Voldir tells the people that he is here for a reason, to protect them from Leroy. He tells them his story. It was a perfect utopia of little green blobs. The species was known as blobs. They were intelligent, yet not exactly strong. One day a blob craved power. He wanted to be stronger than everyone. This strong desire for power ended up being the end of the civilization. This power-craving green blob was known as Leroy. Leroy realized the one thing that was keeping him from getting more power was the fact that he was almost completely immobile. He searched and searched for an answer to movement, leading him to develop blueprints to make out the perfect body. He forged his new armored body out of the strongest metal he could find on his planet. Needing a way to power his new body, he broke into a science lab with his body on a temporary power battery. He found a device capable of absorbing energy and took it to install it onto his body. Leroy went on a rampage with his new body. He single-handedly went to bring the extinction of his own species, leaving only him left. Now that he was the most powerful of his species, he felt complete. He felt like his life was completed, that he was in control. But with his newfound powers, he wanted more. Even though Leroy had a body, he still wasn't able to make it out of the atmosphere. Leroy developed a way for his power source to be transferred throughout the whole body. If he had enough energy, he could be able to transfer his energy into a single position to overload with energy, splitting the time and space in that area to a different location in his current dimension. Leroy absorbed all energy on the entire planet in preparation for this. He struck the air in front of him to tear a rip in front of him. He walked through to appear on a totally new planet. Leroy repeatedly did this process. He would take over the planet, absorb all energy from it, then teleport. Eventually, he would build up enough energy for his ultimate goal, to overload with enough energy to cross into the neighboring dimension. Once he had destroyed and stolen the energy of over 15 different planets, he knew he was ready. Next to the flames of the city he destroyed, he punched the air once again, but with all of his energy. Nothing happened. Leroy had come across an obstacle in his way. The god of the dimension was preventing him from traveling to any different dimension. He vowed to destroy him, Lord Voldir. Voldir says that soon Leroy will arrive, and he will have to fight against him for the sake of the universe. The time had come, Leroy's arrival. Voldir had to leave to fight him. It was their only hope to save the island from what would come next. Voldir ascends off the world and faces Leroy. As a god, Voldir had the ability to prevent a specific being from teleporting to a different dimension. The only way for Leroy to leave is if there was no god to stop him, so his only option was to somehow get rid of Voldir. Leroy had an idea. Leroy took his fist and smashed against Voldir's chest. Light was flashing, a rip in space formed and sucked away Voldir to a totally different dimension. Since it wasn't Leroy who was traveling to a different dimension, his ability still worked on Voldir. Now that nobody was there to stop him, he had all the time he wanted before he left for a new dimension. Leroy smashes off a piece of Ozarka's moon, teleports him and the chunk into the sky above the island, and then rides the falling chunk onto the island. The chunk crashes onto the island. He lands and looks around his landscape he would have to deal with. Leroy shoots off into space to destroy the island that Voldir loved so much. The chunk from Voss, the moon of Ozarka, landed on the northwestern corner of the island, destroying all that lies beneath it. The island seemed to be warming up considerably. Something descends from the skies above to hover over the map. It was Leroy, holding some sphere of sorts. The sphere was bright like the sun, perhaps even some technology Leroy invented. It heated the map so much, people had to resort to evacuating to shelters. Voldir had to come back, and soon. Fearing that Voldir may never return to save them, everyone seeks refuge in the safe houses on the island. Meteors from the moon, Voss, pulverize Voldir's castle. Thankfully, Leroy's miniature sphere burns out over the course of the part. After the sphere completely runs empty, Leroy initiates his next step to destroying the island. Leroy breaks apart pieces from a nearby flourishing planet. The debris was directed towards the island. The meteors rain down on the island. After covering around 60% of the landmass on the island, the meteors grew vibrant life and alien forests called biozones. They flourished and spread through the island. The energy of the plant life was so immense, the once dead Cube of Independence quickly absorbed some of its energy. Its green energy started to glow brighter, eventually becoming just as bright as it once was. The people on the island started to drag it towards the remains of Voldir's castle. The people figured it out. They had a plan to bring back Voldir. They started constructing a red pyramid capable of harnessing incredible amounts of energy. The only other thing they needed for their idea was a way to charge the pyramid. They set up a structure to redirect the biozone's energy to charge the pyramid. Their plan was named Project Scarlet Pyramid. Its purpose was to exert enough energy to rip open a gate to the dimension Volder was sent to, bringing him back to fight Leroy. The day had come. The Scarlet Pyramid was fully charged, taking so much energy from the biozones that they started to return to a green color, just like the rest of the plant life on the island. The pyramid shot a beam of energy from the top, crashing into a singular point. A tear was forming through the space-time fabric. On the other side, it was Volder. He passed through the tear as it shut behind him. Volder was furious, yet he looked deeply disturbed. Perhaps he saw something he shouldn't have on the other side of the portal. Leroy descended back from space one final time. They both immediately charged at one another, sending a shockwave through the whole map. Everything shook. Leroy and Volder clashed around the island. Numerous battles were fought between them, some of which took place in space, others on the island. As the part continued, it seemed that Volder was losing. Every strike he made was slightly weaker than the last, but not for Leroy. The fight to end it all, the last fight. Volder was exhausted, but Leroy was still vital as ever. Leroy struck Volder, sending him across the map. He crashed into the broken pieces of his castle. Leroy walked up. Volder turned his head, seeing the Cube of Independence glowing beside him. Volder struggled getting up, his statue-like body crumbling with every step. He grabbed the cube and started to absorb its power. The energy and green lightning from it shot around Volder's grasp on it. The Cube of Independence glows brighter and brighter, curing and energizing Volder even more and more. Suddenly, the cube shatters and crumbles. Volder stands with a glowing green energy. He strikes back at Leroy, sending him across the map. Leroy was shocked. His armor cracked slightly from the blow. They both charged back at each other, but this time Leroy was the one that seemed to be losing. Finally, Leroy was almost defeated. His armor cracked around him. Volder rises above him, then smashes him into the ground. Leroy pummels into the center of the map. The island goes quiet. Finally, Leroy's body rests in shambles in the crater he was killed in. The island was shattered from all the blows in Volder and Leroy's showdown. Craters and trenches were scattered everywhere. The people had to recover from all the lost lives and destroyed lands. It would take time, but they were all dedicated. All biozones have been used dry for their energy, resulting in them returning to a natural color. The metallic body of Leroy was left in the crater, a sight to behold. Volder lives on, slowly healing from his wounds in the battle. Time passes. "15 years have passed. Everything has been going well. Efforts to rebuild, repopulate, and expand off what has been lost was going strongly. A statue of Volder was erected in his honor. Leroy's body and the Scarlet Pyramid project were both abandoned and now covered with vines and growth. Cap Industries is now the best funded company on the island. It was constructed over the lake in the southeastern portion of the island. The factory would develop weapons known as caps for the Cratons to be able to defend themselves if need be. Cities covered most of the island. It was a paradise to the Cratons. Volder noticed something odd. An ominous presence was detected on the island. Leroy was definitely dead, so it was surprising to Volder. He kept his guard up regardless. Suddenly, the ground started to shake. The volcano was no longer resting. It started to erupt, cracking through the volcanic thermal reactor lodged on top of it. Lava gushed out, pouring rivers throughout the island. They should have been more prepared, but the people on the island were caught off guard by this sudden event. Cities were damaged from the quakes and separated from the lava rivers. Leroy's broken body was covered by the LCC. This place was the Lava Control Center, tasked with the sole purpose of reducing the lava spread and having some sort of control over the situation. Worst of all, Voldir became even more aware of the ominous presence. He noticed it was heading south, but he couldn't exactly tell what was happening. The force was abstract and hard to perceive exactly where or what it was doing. Whatever it was, though, it was certainly powerful, and the people of the island couldn't feel its presence. The volcano's lava was thankfully cooled by the sea surrounding the island, but this caused the island to become separated. As if the landmass was not already lackluster from the Leroy and Voldir fight, the island was now becoming more similar to islets. One year passed, and the people used the condition of the island to their advantage. With the lava splitting the island, there were tons of beaches and islets now. Hotels, seaside resorts, and many other entertainment-based structures were now everywhere on the islets. The LCC was removed and scrapped for parts to create one of these locations, known as the New Waterworks Water Park, built on the northern section of the island. Leroy's body was left sunken below the water. The people noticed that Voldir has been strangely hiding from them. The people start construction on what they consider to be the most intensive project they have had yet. They are constructing a dam to surround the entire island. They have figured that the space was already running low on these small islets, and that expansion would be impossible if they didn't do anything about it. 4 years passed and the dam was finished. All they needed to do was to start draining the water inside the walls of it to uncover what lies underneath. Four years passed after the dam was constructed. Once the underneath had been revealed, the people needed to grow back plant life from what was underwater. They cleared areas to fly planes specifically to dump fertilizer over the underneath. Within just a few months, grass and plant life sprouted about, except for the underneath side of the moon, which was unable to be fertilized. The water park was abandoned to create a much larger one next to it. The volcano has subsided completely. The scientists speculate that it wouldn't be a problem for another estimated 660 years. The southern dead grasslands was killed due to past experimentations from the fertilizer in order to perfect it for the rest of the map. Voldir's castle ruins were revealed, along with Leroy's body, both of which were immensely corroded. Abruptly, the ominous force Voldir was concerned about started to pulse. The energy was enough to even have the people of the island see it. It was right above where the Scarlet Pyramid project was abandoned, specifically above the pyramid itself. The force shoots down into the pyramid, disappearing completely. A moment passes. Then, the pyramid twitches and sparks red energy around its corners. The people of the island go to investigate, sending helicopters and other vehicles to the pyramid. The pyramid shakes violently and then suddenly outbursts. An energetic shockwave crashes through the entire island, taking helicopters down with it. The power on the island flickers. The pyramid sends another shockwave of energy. The power flickers more. People get injured and run for their lives, but it might not matter. Finally, the last and largest shockwave booms through the air. Some buildings get knocked over, but all of them lose power. The energy from the Scarlet Pyramid was so intense, the land around it converted into a similar red color. A flash of red light shines out of the pyramid. When it subsided, the pyramid was gone. The Scarlet Pyramid wasn't what it used to be. It was now possessed by the ominous force, thus renamed to be Crimson. Although the island was now out of power, the people had an even bigger problem, the disappearance of Crimson. While the search for Crimson continues, the people of the island need to find a way to bring back the power. The people noticed there were crystals in the underneath. These crystals show to be remnant of the meteors that caused the biozones. They harvest the biocrystals for electricity. Factories and facilities were built. "14 structures called lightning towers were placed around the map. The purpose was to transport the immense energy from the biocrystals around the map, restoring power back to the people. After their construction, the Scarlet Zone started to return to normal. Scientists speculate that the energy from Crimson's shockwaves overloaded these areas with this energy, killing them and turning them into a similar red color to Crimson. The lightning towers were designed to expel some of their energy around, reducing the scarlet zones because of the biocrystal's life energy. The water park in the northwestern part of the island was bought off and shut down to be excavated for resources to be used for the lightning towers. The northern caverns collapsed and the ruins from the northeastern dark grasslands were cleaned up. Suddenly, after searching and searching, Crimson appeared. After reluctantly chasing Crimson for a week, he was finally captured and contained. An extremely high security and confined facility was created to store and isolate Crimson to study. One year passes since the capture of Crimson, and the Scarlet Zones are almost entirely reduced. The people celebrate the 1-year anniversary of Crimson's capture. The studies on Crimson continue. Signs show that his energy signs were unknown, like he had found a way to hide them somehow. The scientists were concerned, but determined to find out the true nature of Crimson. After peace for so long, Boulder comes back from hiding. He said he was theorizing and speculating about the correlation between the Scarlet Pyramid and the ominous force that possessed it. Boulder had figured it out. The ominous force must have been the remaining soul of Leroy. His physical form may have perished, but his undying urge to live never did. He must have gone to possess the Scarlet Pyramid in an attempt to redeem himself. Crimson was Leroy. Leroy was Crimson. It had to be the answer. Suddenly, the ground shook. The prison containing Crimson in the center of the island was destroyed. Floating above was Crimson. Boulder was scared. He couldn't fight against it. There was too much energy. A purple beacon of energy beamed out of the base and the tip of Crimson. Something bad was happening. All power on the island flickered. Crimson had been slowly absorbing the energy from the prison he was stuck in, eventually collecting enough to be able to initiate his plan. Slowly, the purple energy would form a spherical field covering over the island, essentially trapping the island in a purple energy sphere. Scientists were desperately scavenging to find answers, and never found one. The fight between Leroy and Boulder may have never actually ended. Leroy possessed the only object capable of interdimensional travel for a reason, but where he was taking them was completely unknown. All that was clear was that Leroy wasn't letting Boulder win so easily. Time was running out. The people on the island weren't sure if they could possibly win, but they still tried. In a desperate attempt to stop Crimson, the dam the people took years to complete was rigged with explosives. The results from detonating it would almost surely kill everyone, but at least it gave them a chance of stopping Crimson. Everyone braced themselves, knowing that this was the end for them. The explosives were detonated. Consecutive explosions blew around the dam. The dam collapsed, sending a wall of water pummeling through. The tsunami of water caved closer and closer to the island. The end was here. Crimson knew what was happening. They were fighting back. He didn't have any more time to waste. In a moment's notice, Crimson used the rest of his energy in him to finish the dimension shifting process, knowing well that it would kill him in the process. The tsunami started to get closer and closer by the second. Everyone had accepted their death. Crimson's beacons of energy charged stronger and stronger. The purple field of energy became even more concentrated by the moment. The energy became so concentrated that the people lost sight of the tsunami outside the field. Just as the tsunami was about to crash into the island, the field went completely opaque with energy. The people waited for the tsunami to crash through and stop Crimson. Yet nothing happened. It was completely quiet. They looked at where Crimson was. He was powerless and dead. This time, no ominous energy was left over. The land they stood on, or what was left of it, seemed to be free-floating inside the massive energy field that Crimson created. Did Crimson actually win? Was shifting to this unknown dimension so vital to his motives that he was willing to sacrifice his own life for it? The people looked around what was left of their home. All these years of work and effort, wasted, all of it, completely abandoned. What has been done is finished. There was nothing the people of the island could do about it. Crimson had succeeded in his plan. The people in Volder were transported to an unknown location in an unknown universe. The world as they knew it was over. Scientists studied the environment. specifically where exactly they were, but there was no answer. It seemed that they were in a completely new realm, a place between time and space, only to exist within the boundaries of Crimson's purple field. Volder was quiet. He had just failed his own universe, the place he dedicated himself to protect for all eternity, just to be taken away. The Treq universe was godless now, and Volder believes it is him to blame for this. He travels near to where Crimson was floating, sat on the ledge overlooking Crimson, and silently waited. Suddenly, there was an intense flash of light. "84 years have passed since the abandonment of the Industrial Industries, the largest and most influential company on the island. They lost their audience and the demand for their products sank, leaving their business in bankruptcy. The Trough Island was full of wonders. There was a place known to the locals as Lava Land, supposedly has been an active lava region for a very long time. The lake located to the east of the Northern Laboratory was a very popular attraction to the people, along with the expansive morning swamp that spreads throughout the entire central region of the island. Seemingly out of nowhere, the people noticed bright flashes in the sky. They were meteors caused by debris from the nearby planet Villian. Villian was being destroyed by an unknown race, at least according to the scientific studies. After the debris crashed over the island, the people investigated. Some meteors were full of plant life from the various biomes of Villian, but most notably, the meteors contained a substance. This substance was shown to be extremely hazardous and infectious, hence the namesake, the infection. The infection was spreading faster than anything that has been seen before. The place that had received the most infection was the abandoned Industrial Industries, now recognized as the Infected Industries. Much like the infected meteors from before, another object fell from the stars. This one was different though. It turned out to be a UFO. The ship crashed near a village just next to the Infected Industries. The UFO contained a species of robotic aliens from planet Villian. They explore and survey the island, most likely looking for refuge from their destroyed planet. The people of the island noticed this, and they start taking precautions. A place called Market Town was developed to provide a consistent source of food to the island, along with mining operations stationed at Misty Mountain to provide other resources. Though the mining operations were also to study the alien robots. There was an abnormally large alien robot that was dead at Misty Mountain, so the mining operations started to scientifically investigate the properties of the robots. Though, unbeknownst to anyone on the island, there was a small mansion located deep in the eastern woods of the island. This place was said to be abandoned for decades, but out of nowhere, there was some construction for what seemed to be a launch pad. To counter the threat of the infection, the scientists developed an organization hosted at the Northern Laboratory named the Infection Research Facility, also known as the IRF. As the infection spreads rapidly, the people panic more. Research to develop the cure was in progress and had to be quick. Optimistically, a new city was built and located in the northwest, known as Tarragon Town. The place was the most populated area on the entire island, with more residents quickly moving in. The beloved lake besides the IRF was named into Urban Lake, with a massive bridge going over it to further bring attention to the lake. The mining and research operations on Misty Mountain were upgraded, with a runway for transportation of resources through aircraft. After surveying and drilling for materials, the alien robots collected enough materials to construct a section of the island to claim as their own. This place was called Xandromino. The people of the island refer to this race of alien robots as Xandromnians. As time passed, Xandromnians seemed to want more and more. Invading the island was just the beginning of what they had planned. The people wouldn't accept these aliens taking over their home. After spying on Xandromino, it was noticed that the Xandrominians were very familiar with the infection. They had created a machine capable of intaking the slimy substance of the infection and implanting it with an artificial brain chip to control them and use them as weapons. To counter the Zandromanian forces, Tarragon Town started development for a secret weapon of massive size. The strange mansion in the eastern woods continued to build something, expanding past the launch pad. They also started to make the base of what looked like to be a rocket of sorts. Whatever it is that the people at the mansion were planning to do, it's definitely kept secret from the rest of the people. The time had come. The Zandromanians and the infection slime beasts were released to attack Tarragon. Tarragon forces were released to fight back. The Terrabots were created from reverse engineering the dead Zandromanians, and thus looked almost identical to the Zandromino robots, other than their sky blue color. Terrabots were released to fight back, along with a massive secret weapon Tarragon was working on, called the Terratron. It was a massive version of the Terrabots, capable of major destruction against the Zandromanian forces. The battle started, and it went down just northwest of Zandromino. The fight went on brutally between the Terrabots and the Zandromanians. The infection beasts that were created were killed off one by one, until eventually they combined forces. They formed together all into one massive substance. The beast grew limbs and was just as tall as the Terratron. The Terratron and the massive infection beast fought and fought endlessly, with shards of metal from the Terratron being broken off as chunks of the infectious sludge were blown off of the massive infection monster. The monster suddenly wrapped itself around the Terratron, constricting it entirely. If the Terratron were to die, they would be taken over by this massive beast the Zandromanians created. Suddenly, the Terratron began beeping. It beeped faster and faster until it detonated. Tarragon secretly put a self-destruct sequence inside of the robot, just in case it was in a situation such as what it was in currently. The explosion devastated the beast so severely that every brain chip inside the monster was completely broken. The monster had been defeated, and all the Zandromanian forces retreated back to Zandromino. Tarragon had won for now, but only time would tell what would come next between the conflicts of Tarragon and Zandromino. The Zandromanians had all retreated back to Zandromino, afraid to fight back again. The people were on edge from this, but eventually settled with the fact that Zandromanians were now surrendered and contained in the center of Morning Swamp. On a different note, there were little random shacks appearing across the island, all looking exactly the same. Some people would look inside them, but the doors were locked. The lava at Lavaland was oddly beginning to subside. As the development for the cure was getting closer and closer, other scientific breakthroughs were being discovered. In Misty Mountain, the people researched and discovered technology from reverse engineering the dead Zandromanians. They had built-in drills and pumps that would collect resources and infection sludge. They assumed they would transport this to facilities stationed in Zandromino, though the largest discovery they made was from researching the crashed UFO. This contained a special device that was capable of distorting the environment with high levels of energy to break open portals through space to other places, essentially allowing these spacecrafts to teleport around space. The scientists took the device for themselves and attempted to recreate their own spacecraft at the Misty Mountain Research Base to test the device with. They then started the construction for the Tarragon Space Traveler. Suddenly, the people heard something off in the distance. The rocket that the secret mansion was working on lifted off. The people watched it rise into the sky with curiosity, but oddly enough, it seemed to stop rising. Then panic rose amongst the people. It wasn't a rocket, but rather a massive missile charging straight towards the island. As it got closer, though, people noticed it was heading towards the middle of the island, right over Zandromino. Then the missile struck. A shockwave was felt throughout the whole island. People went to look. Not a single Zandromanian was alive. The entire place was obliterated, leaving a crater larger than the size of Zandromino itself. The people had officially gotten rid of the Zandromanians, but who sent the missile? And were the people satisfied with this? The Zandromanians had surrendered, yet they were killed anyway. Unknown to the people, there was one last Zandromanian, heavily injured. This last one traveled far off to the mountain next to Market Town, and died. The IRF had done it. The cure was made, with tests being run until they were completely positive that it would work. The small shacks that appeared on the map previously then suddenly opened the top of their roof. Antenna-like towers peeked out and started transmitting the cure through energy waves in the nearby area. Once the cure waves struck the infection substance, they would dry up into a blue, shriveled stone. These cure shacks were placed strategically to cover all the areas that had the infection, so that not a single bit of the infection was left uncured. For the sake of scientific research, 2 meteor craters were isolated with a force field to contain the infection inside. After research was done, the infection zone force field would slowly shrink and shrink until the infection dies off. The first infection zone was labeled the Ripped Crater and was located southwestern part of the island. The second infection zone was labeled the Sinkhole and was located next to the mansion in the woods. The once infected Industries has now become the Cured Industries, with a massive crater of infected meteorites next to it becoming cured as well. Strangely, the dead remains from some Xandromedians had certain spectral forces rise above. These forces slowly made their way across the island until they reached the mountain next to the market town, the resting place of the last living Xandromedian. They all collectively gather around the Xandromedian's remains. Over by Misty Mountain, Tarragon's space traveler was completely ready for takeoff. The people would push their boundaries and explore further. The launch sequence commenced. The ship rocketed off into the sky before ripping through the space-time fabric to a different place. Everyone waited patiently for the ship to return, but it was taking longer than expected. Suddenly, the ship came back, bringing a vortex through space-time from where it returned. The ship first shot through the ground in the eastern part of the map, directly through one of the non-infected meteors from Voss. The vortex then began to shoot out things from its place of origin, including chunks from a mesa biome. The ship haphazardly flew around the map until it lost control once again, flying straight up into the sky before teleporting away once again. The people didn't have to wait much longer until the ship came back. It broke straight through the urban lake bridge, perfectly breaking through and creating another space-time vortex underneath the rubble. The ship started to distort the island they lived on. Structures from around the island started to teleport about nearby the vortexes. The land below the crashed UFO floated up and went towards the energy of the eastern vortex. Other structures did the same, like some of the farmland from Market Town and a random house. From the northern vortex, floating islands carrying a building from the Cured Industries, a rumbled ruin structure, and a house from Tarragontropolis all surrounded the vortex. The ship finally broke through the space-time one last time, but took longer to return than any of the other times. But just as the people were sure it was gone, it came back, bringing an entire floating desert with it. The vortex it left behind was in the southwestern portion of the island. The massive desert island that was brought along towered over everything, and was seemingly glitched to float above the ground just like the other floating islands around the vortexes. The ship was low on fuel, and broke through its last and shortest teleporting portal. It quickly came back and crashed near rumbled ruins, sadly killing off the crew of the ship in the process. This disaster was so terrible for Tarragon scientists' reputation, so the government cut their funding, and had to resort to fixing the matter themselves. Tarragon Town was completely upgraded, now known as Tarragontropolis, with new buildings constructed and others under construction. The clock tower, restaurant, and other large-scale buildings were all built in this process. One of these buildings, the Hospital of Tarragontropolis, had its upper floor closed off to the public, most likely due to contained renovations and constructions. The most important new building in Tarragon was Tarragon Tower. Known for being the largest and tallest structure in Tarragon, this tower contained large amounts of power for the city. Tarragon Tower was the symbol of the thriving city. The floating desert in the southwest was investigated. On top of the island was the other half of a house on the island that was teleported away, along with some cranes from the construction in Tarragontropolis. Most notably, there was an ancient alien village located there. The buildings had purple scriptures of some alien language. Translations were attempted, but failed. And the largest building was a room with its walls lined with skulls of alien species. Below the floating desert were odd, shadow-like tentacles. The species of shadow creatures that were under the shadow of the desert island seemed to have been carried over from where the desert came originally. The creatures never left from under the shadow of the floating island, even at night. Suspiciously, the mansion where the missile was launched from was nowhere to be seen, but nobody knew where it went. The Tarragon government took advantage of this. They went over to see where the mansion once was, investigating the area and getting more information behind who was running the operation with the missile against Andromeda. They found that the mansion had been abandoned for decades, only to be bought recently by a man named John Carter. They noticed that John had bought off the mansion to construct a sort of laboratory for his own personal use, discreet from the rest of the island. John had made a very modern underground lab and an interface installed, showing the blueprints for the missile along with his plans for destroying Andromeda. John Carter was known for his inventive mind and his fortune he made from selling his creations and weapons to the Tarragon government during the war against Andromedians. He was also known for helping design the Terrabots along with the Terratrons. John had been creating the missile to sell to Tarragon during the war. However, Tarragon ended up defeating Andromeda much sooner than he had anticipated, leaving the missile unneeded by Tarragon. John must have been desperate for more money, so sending the missile himself would potentially bring the war back again. The current whereabouts of John were completely unknown to the people on the island, but maybe it should be kept that way. The dead robot suddenly consumed all of the energy from the souls of the Andromedians. The robot stood up with its creaking legs. A deep vibration rumbled from the Andromedian, sending out some sort of signal. The robot's legs gave out as it crashed back to the ground. Suddenly, a fleet of Andromedian ships flew down. The people panicked, and the Tarragon government prepared. Following the fleet of Andromedian ships led many other ships of massive and varying sizes. The largest one was the mothership, storing immense amounts of energy. The Andromedian Empire was called by the last remaining Andromedian in a desperate attempt for revenge. They unleashed destruction where they hovered, destroying Market Town in the process, replacing the region into two areas. The northern area replacing Market Town being Xandrania, and the southern area becoming Xandranio. With the whole island at stake, Tarragon had to resort to desperate measures. The only way to take out both regions of Xandrania and Xandranio was to destroy them the same way they were destroyed the first time: a missile. Tarragon officials didn't have time to waste, so building a missile large enough to suffice would take too long. They resorted to constructing rockets onto the sides of Tarragon Tower, the tallest and grandest tower in all of Tarragon. Since this tower brought energy to the city, it would have enough energy to take out the Andromedians once and for all. The time had come. Tarragon Tower was now rigged to become a weapon of utter destruction. They launched the tower straight for the Andromedian territory. The bomb struck the Andromedians, instantly killing them and their entire empire. Tarragon was left powerless, and the island was finally without war. From space, a massive purple mothership descended. The ship slowed and then hovered above robot reminiscences. Floating robots dispersed from the ship, carrying a massive battery towards Tarragon Tropolis. The robots dropped the battery in place where Tarragon Tower launched, and attached wires to support power for Tarragon. The people were thankful, but it seemed that the robots were even more thankful. They introduced themselves as the Zaders. They had been running from Andromedians and now could live in peace knowing that they were finally gone. To show their gratitude, the Zaders delivered more than just the battery powering Tarragon. They delivered 5 floating purple structures across the island, one spherical one over the northern laboratory, a raindrop-shaped one at Rumbled Ruins, a diamond-shaped one at Misty Mountains, a square-like shape in the southeast next to Dusty Desert in the Vortex, and a final glowing one right under the Zader mothership. All of the structures radiated energy across where they hovered, providing an equal amount of energy across the island. These structures now enabled the island with indefinite energy. They would never need to generate any energy again. Any electrical device simply needed to have an attachment to it, and it would absorb the energy waves from the nearest structure. To celebrate and take advantage of this newfound energy source, the island constructed Smooth Stone City in the southeast with the help of Zeta robots during the construction. A laboratory was built around the square-like purple structure there to study Zeta technology, along with lots of residential housing within the city. The hospital in Tarragontropolis was acting strange. Rockets, much like those installed onto the Tarragon Tower, were being constructed and attached to the sides of the hospital. Something extremely odd was happening with the top floor. Something much more than just renovations and additional construction. The island was in the best state it has ever been in. Cities were booming and the people were thriving. But randomly, the Zetas returned back to their mothership, dropping everything they were doing. Once all of them went back, the ship took off into the sky. The people were confused. They had finally become safe and left? Suddenly, the floating purple structure shook and stabilized. They all collectively floated down into the ground, melting whatever stood in their way. The structures didn't stop and continued to dive slowly and shallowly into the ground below. The rockets on the side of the hospital sparked, and the hospital launched, going far off into the sky. The Tarragon government tried to investigate the hospital before this, but were completely unable to. But the mystery of the hospital was the least of their concerns. The people did everything in their power to stop the structures from what they were about to do. Many gave up, others kept striving. There was just no time left. The purple structures stopped diving into the ground. Each of them rested about 15 to 20 feet deep into the ground below. Then, they all shut off, leaving silence before the end of the island. They detonated. The structures that once provided eternal energy to the island became the very end of the people. Each and every person was killed in the detonation process of each purple structure. The spherical one above the northern laboratory exploded, unleashing a swarm of micro-drones. The drones flew over the northern area of the island, connecting together and completely blocking the area of any light. The drones then sprayed a shadow-like sludge down on the land, smothered with darkness. The sludge from all over would combine into shadow creatures, exactly like those from Under Dusty Desert. The shadow creature ripped apart the land and killed every last person that resided there. The raindrop-shaped purple structure above the rumbled ruins exploded, ironically dousing the area with lava once again. Lava geysers shot from under the ground in the area, building lava pools around. The diamond-shaped one exploded, freezing the surrounding area completely. Spikes of ice formed and frigid snow smothered the ground. The square-like one exploded, distorting the gravity of the region. All debris from the explosion floated and scattered nearby. Finally, the one in the center of the island blew up, causing the largest explosion out of the rest. The shockwave from this one instantly killed every living thing, or what was left still living. The shockwave broke apart the ground in several directions, connecting the craters from all other Zeta bombs. The people of Villian were dead. The Zeters believed species that were nearing to be as advanced as them could perceive a threat to their rule in the future. Their solution to this was simple. Never let those species get to that point. By finding them early enough, they could execute them with ease. Zeters never were the ones running from the Xandromanians, but rather the Xandromanians were the ones running from the Zeters. The hospital that launched off was now floating through space. On the upper floor resided the mansion from the Eastern Woods, along with the mastermind himself, John Carter. John was the lead of the Tarragon space traveler operation. His plan was to test out the teleportation device within the UFO to his own advantage. The best way to do this was to see if the device was capable of preserving humans through its teleportation process, and if the portals opened could be controlled and placed far with coordinates. Both of these would be tested through the Tarragon space traveler. To take extra precautions, John couldn't let the operation be successful. If it ended in success, then Tarragon would use it to their advantage. John rigged the Tarragon space traveler to lose control with a mere click of a button at his hand. When the testing had initiated, the Tarragon space traveler broke through its first portal, testing both if humans survived through the teleportation process, and if the teleportation could be controlled to far distances. Fortunately, the portal opened up exactly where the coordinates were set, and the crew survived without a scratch. John knew it had to be done, so he initiated the plan. The Tarragon space traveler then lost control, teleporting at random and eventually resulting in the death of the crew. Just as John wanted, the Tarragon government cut off the operation completely, leaving him to have the teleportation device just to himself. John then went to the next step of his plan, to install it where nobody would expect, right under their noses. He teleported the mansion into the upper section of the hospital in Tarragon, and constructed the perfect shuttle for space travel to escape from the destructive and inevitable fate that the island was set towards. Now floating through space, the hospital was calculating and searching for a civilization much like the one on his home planet Villian, while John would cryogenically freeze himself. His search continues for years until the perfect place is found. While John Carter was cryogenically frozen, the system of the hospital searched for the perfect place. 16 years pass, and the hospital finds it, the planet Zephyr. The teleportation process activates and travels straight to Zephyr in an instant. The systems of the hospital awake John from his cryosleep. The hospital initiated its landing sequence onto the island of Zephyr. A problem arose when landing the hospital. The landing region had a blizzard, causing the hospital to lose some control and crash onto its side. Damage to the hull was severe, but the internals survived just fine. John stepped out of the hospital after the snowstorm, looking around the area. There was a massive skyscraper to his left and a ravine below where he crashed. John scavenged the nearby area, finding an abandoned entrance to an underground area. This area was inside the ravine he crashed on. It was an abandoned laboratory. The place had some devices still on display, such as the B6 hover device and its prototype. It also contained a massive energy core of sorts, labeled as the Source. It was contained in a large storage unit with 4 separate tubes connecting it to the walls. These tubes run beneath the ground for large distances to many areas around the island. The tubes connected to several machines known as reactors. Some of these were functional, yet unpowered. Others were entirely dysfunctional. The ultimate purpose for all of these were unknown, but according to the diagram in the abandoned laboratory, 4 reactors along with the core reactor need to be active to initiate its purpose. John decided to reside in the laboratory for his stay on Zephyr. The island on Zephyr offered much to its civilization. Locations include the following: a smaller village besides the entrance to the abandoned laboratory, the castle in the middle of the island, being a castle with smaller houses within its walls, Construction City, which comprises only the city hall and 1 other house, though much more is planned to be built here. The unknown disaster in the northern part of the island. All that is known about this place was that it was once a bustling city, but has been destroyed long ago, with whoever was responsible for its destruction leaving their mark with a purple flag. By far the most remarkable location on the island was the amusement park that was built on the sea, Pufferfish Land. This park had much to discover, such as the Southern Pufferfish Park and the Aquifer Lagoon water park that was underneath the southern part. Pufferfish Park had many rides, such as the confusing puffer coaster, the dropper, Ferris wheel, and many more. The Aquifer Lagoon was constructed under the water of the sea. It was complete with all walls being sturdy glass to give the best and one-of-a-kind experience when in the water park. Future sections of the park, including Wild Wonderland and Beanland, are currently under construction, but soon enough will open to the public. And in the middle of it all stood a massive and towering statue of a pufferfish. The most successful company on the island, however, Inca Kola, also is located within the sea. Inca Kola has been serving people of the island the most refreshing and finest drink for ages. Besides the potential health risks of the drink, Inca Kola has been Zephian's favorite delicacy. This Inca Kola factory in the sea is essentially a large-scale cube installed beneath the water, powered by hydroelectricity from the water let in from one of the walls. Inca Kola factory is connected to the mainland with a road so that the delivery is never an issue for the company. The final thing that caught John's eye on the island was the southeastern region. There was a massive structure, looking as if it had been abandoned and left to collect dust. After John did thorough investigations on the southeastern device, he had a hypothesis. The device was most likely a death ray of sorts that was going to be used against someone. Exactly who it was still a mystery to him, but whoever it was, they had won before the people ever got to use the weapon. Weeks pass, and John befriends the people of Zephyr. John noticed something in the sky one day. It was a small speck of purple. It hadn't been there before, but it seemed like it was nearing every day. Could it be them? The Zaders that took away his home? John refused to let them take away his home again, so he prepared to fight back. The death ray in the southeast had to be the answer to this, but it has been offline for who knows how long. John started to plan a way to reactivate the weapon. The speck of purple in the sky became closer and closer. The fleet of Zaders were closing in fast. John figured out that the reactors around the island were all connected to the core inside the abandoned laboratory. The unknown purpose of these reactors must be to power the death ray, since the death ray consisted of 4 spires, all surrounding the central and largest spire. The 4 spires around the center one were powered by 4 reactors, leaving the center to be powered by the largest reactor, the core reactor. John used the blueprints and parts in the abandoned laboratory to create power sources of core. This would float with the B6 hover device over to a functional reactor. They then would attach to the reactor and inject the power source into the reactor. This was done to 4 of the reactors from around the map. The only last step John needed to fulfill was powering the core reactor. The Zaders were now closer than ever. John was running low on time, panicking to power the core reactor. Some of the people on the island vouched for what he was doing. These people were then hired by John, birthing what is known as the Mansion People. The Mansion People construct a base just north of the death ray. The base was installed within the wall of a mountain, but was too classified to be exposed. They then set up a piping system that would continually pipe water from the sea to the top of the mountain. The water would cascade down and create a waterfall to block the entrance of the Mansion People's death ray bunker. Death ray operations would be run in the bunker, along with preparations to decimate the Zaders once and for all. Consequently, from the waterfall, the surrounding area became extremely lively from water, becoming known as fertile farlands. Pufferfish Land opened their next new location, Wild Wonderland. The place was complete with exhibits for polar bears, foxes, volcanic creatures, panda bears, pigs, and an aquarium. A new underwater volcanic zone was discovered, although it seemed dormant. A cruise ship was also constructed alongside a new dock. The ship set sail every so often, giving people the experience of a lifetime. The ship would tour around the sea, showing remains of ancient cities, the underwater volcanic zone, a complete trip of Pufferfish Land, and a tour of the Inca Cola factory. The time had come. Just as the Zaders had entered the atmosphere and got even closer than they had ever had before, John powered and activated the core reactor. The death ray shook the ground as it became fully active. The power reserves for the death ray were completely built up. All they needed was to time the shot on the Zader mothership. The Zaders were flying straight down, and John gave the signal. The death ray glowed and fired an immense beam of energy straight through the mothership. The destruction had completely killed the Zaders as they crashed onto the island. John and the Zephians had ended the Zaders in an instant. The crash site of the Zaders was known as the Graveyard. The fire from the Zaders' demise stayed ablaze for weeks. But as the one issue dropped, another one arose. The death ray was only made to be fired once, so after it fired, it suffered heavy damages. Along with the death ray becoming damaged, the energy leaked into the surrounding area. The ground became hard and solid like granite, while also having a purple tint like the energy source. Even some rock formations grew, which consisted of a slightly less concentrated, yet still very powerful form of the energy source that was used for the death ray. This region became known as Death Ray Devastation. The main and most impactful consequence of the death ray was known as the internal storm. The strange properties of the energy source that the death ray used interacted with the atmosphere in an unexpected way. The outburst of energy attracted all clouds on Zephyr to the island, providing a consistent and seemingly unending storm onto the island. The Mansion people were unaffected by these consequences from using the Death Ray. They accepted them, but another group of Zephians refused to accept this. This group established 3 storm-eliminating stations around the island. They then powered these stations and erected towers that would attempt to absorb the remnant Death Ray energy from the atmosphere to rid the storm. But the group didn't stop there. They noticed that the Mansion people were getting too comfortable with their new profound leader. Their leader, John Carter, was becoming corrupt with his power over the people. The Mansion people pushed their boundaries, saying they would have the right for more control due to saving the island. They would say that if it wasn't for them using the Death Ray to destroy the Zaders, nobody would be here at all. The small village beside the abandoned laboratory started to protest against the Mansion people, setting up anti-Mansion people signs outside their homes. They refused to let the Mansion people take over their island. The Mansion people couldn't afford to have anyone turning against them. The Death Ray was repaired and was powered again using the energy source chunks from the nearby purple landscape. Death Ray refractors were set up floating with the B6 hover device and were capable of absorbing and redirecting a low-scale energy blast from the Death Ray. These Death Ray refractors were set up to refract a blast from the Death Ray and to send the blast right where it needed to go. John ordered the Death Ray refractors to be set in alignment with the small village that was protesting. Although it may be true that the Mansion people saved the island, the Storm Eliminators were still against the unreasonable corruption they had. They developed a new power against the Mansion people, the Metacore. On a separate note, Pufferfishland opened up their 4th part of the park, Beanland. Specializing in delicious meals for the family, Beanland mainly is known for its massive Biggie's Beans restaurant. The extensive menu guarantees something delicious for everyone. The Mansion people were fed up by the small village's protests. John initiated the plan and blasted a Death Ray beam. The beam was absorbed and redirected towards the small village, obliterating the town in an instant. Not a single person survived, but it was for the greater good of the Mansion people's rule. Due to the weak construction and renovations of the Death Ray, devastation from its last blast was much worse than anticipated. The entire region from where the Death Ray was located was overtaken and became solid and purple. As the eternal storm subsided from the help of these storm-eliminating stations, the tensions of the Mansion people and the Metacore grew. The castle was overtaken by the Mansion people to become Mansion Monarchy. Along with this, the Mansion people developed a new military base just west of Mansion Monarchy. Drones were constructed to store the Death Ray energy source within them. They then had miniature Death Rays installed below them, allowing them to fire energy beams at a moment's notice. Though something very strange was located beside the mansion base, a being trapped under the ice. The being was massive in size, and the icy snow covering it seemed to be slowly moving away from it, uncovering more and more of the being as time passes. The Mansion people run investigations on the being, though none were too extensive due to their preoccupation in the war. The Metacore took a more traditional militaristic route. They had a base in the southwest equipped with tanks. They also had a northwestern military camp next to the graveyard that would store their explosives. Their aircraft was stationed on their sea base, and their final and largest base located in the northern mountains, the Metacore headquarters. Battles broke out and were fought relentlessly, but during all the conflict, the cruise ship planned an escape from the island for good. Many Zephians were desperate to get away from the Mansion people's control, so the ship was completely filled with people and set sail to never return. On the bright side, Construction City has grown significantly, becoming the most populated place on the island. Along with this, the Mansion People's Science Branch was creating a new laboratory using experimental technology. The lab would be generated from the environment, setting its completion to be done within the next few months. Pufferfishland started their final expansion to the park, the Treq Towers. These would be futuristic hotels people can stay at while having fun at Pufferfishland. A total of 4 towers are planning to be built. Each tower sat on an artificial cloud with a rocket booster and a stabilizer to keep them up in the air. The war ends, leaving the Mansion people victorious over the island. The Metacore strived to win, but couldn't against the power of the Mansion people. To prevent anyone from escaping the reign of the Mansion people, they would need to trap everyone. But even if the border controls were set around the island, it would never completely stop everyone from escaping. They had to make it impossible. An alien machine was discovered under the sea. The device seemed to be salvaged from a different alien race, not from this planet. John recognized the technology. Could this device be the reason why Zeiders were after Zandromanians? The device was capable of generating insane amounts of energy, along with the familiar teleportation technology. John studied the device, leading him to his master plan. John flew B-6 hover devices over to the alien technology, attached them to the sides, and activated the technology. The device worked exactly as expected. With the reliable teleportation technology from the Zandromanians, John was able to teleport away all of the water from the sea they were in. Surrounding the island was barren landscape that stretched farther than the eye could see. It was the dead ocean. Had John gone mad, or was this idea perfect for his reign of the island? Nobody was able to escape. Even those that did wouldn't make it far. The drought brought many problems. The Inca Cola factory didn't have water to power it, thus forcing the factory to shut down. Most importantly, the people of the island were entirely trapped under the rule of the Mansion people. The Metacore was gone, and the Zephians had nowhere to go. The disappearance of the sea, however, brought many new discoveries, such as ancient ruins under Pufferfish Land and the bones of extinct sea creatures. Suddenly, the ground from the droughted area shook. The mountainside next to what used to be the underwater volcanic zone broke open. From the rubble of the destruction extended an antenna-like structure. The antenna made a low rumbling noise, causing the ground to shake once more. 5 ancient tower-like structures arose from the ground around the droughted ocean. Almost instantly, the area around each tower began to grow plant life. These life-giving towers were essentially reviving what used to be the sea. Along with the regrowth of the environment arose ancient structures within the ground. These ancient places revealed unknown history to even the native Zephians. These ruins were built on the ground like the ocean was never there to begin with. Strangely, not a single scripture says anything about the ocean at all. What the scriptures did depict was their discoveries and inventions for growing of plant life. The society had created 5 life towers surrounding the area they lived in. These towers would exert a green smog over the area, converting the surrounding area into whatever type of plant life they were chosen to create, thus terraforming the society's environment into whatever they choose. Perhaps the life tower's smog started to have side effects on the environment itself, essentially giving a very rudimentary consciousness to the land. This would explain why the land had the urge to revive itself by releasing the towers once more after the sea of water disappeared. Perhaps Zeiders ended their society by doing the opposite of what John did. The Zeiders could have drowned the ancient society by using the Zandromanian teleportation device to teleport a sea of water over their civilization. The Zeiders may have been against them because of their discovery to easily replicate plant life extremely fast with extreme precision, hence their advancements could pose a threat to the Zeider Empire in the future. This history uncovered about the island was interesting, but not exactly used for the Mansion people. Perhaps expanding their empire to new lands was an option, but it still didn't seem exactly useful to them. The Mansion People's science branch had fully generated their new lab. The generation succeeded almost entirely except for an excess of area that was generated on the side of the lab. The place would be named Southern Laboratory by John Carter. Out of the blue, a very small town develops just south of the old Metacore base. The town boldly set up anti-Mansion people propaganda, activating the drones from the Mansion base to take care of it. Once the drones arrived, however, they noticed something. The town was completely fake. All houses were setups for the drones to come near. In an instant, the town detonates and explodes. All of the remaining drones are demolished, leaving the Mansion people defenseless. Although this threatened the Mansion people, it mostly just angered John Carter. After the event, John immediately started back mining operations in the Death Ray Devastation to gather more of the power source for his new and familiar weapon of choice, missiles. As expected, the life towers started to spew out their green smog. Growth of life spread everywhere from the new smog. growing forests all over the valley that was once the sea. A jungle grew in the south of the valley, followed by a pine forest in the west, a swamp in the center, plains in the south, and hints of a thickly wooded biome in the north by the oasis. A new nightclub was constructed in the snow biome, just next to the hospital ship. The place became popular with the locals quickly. Pufferfish Land has become officially completed after its final fourth tech tower was constructed. Though Pufferfish Land has stopped expanding, the fun is never planned to end. Unfortunately, the Wild Wonderland Park at Pufferfish Land was closed due to renovations and repair to the park, but should be back open shortly. The construction for the fleet of missiles under the Mansion People has begun, scaring the Zephyans of the island. Hope has really been lost. Suddenly, something was happening by the unknown disaster. The ground began to split apart, crumbling the ruined buildings, but the split ground began to reveal something. It was a massive door opening, showing a hidden Metacore base, right under the Mansion People's noses the whole time. The base was complete with 4 rockets prepared to take off into space. The Mansion People couldn't let the Metacore win. They beat them once, they can do it again. The Mansion People had a much better plan in mind. If nobody wanted to follow in the lead of the Mansion People, then they would leave them for a better place where only they can rule, the moon. Research was done, finding that this moon was unusual compared to anything John has ever seen. The moon contained a material known as cyanium. This material was stronger than any power source John has ever seen, even more so than the power source that the Death Ray used. Cyanium would provide so much incredible power to the Mansion People that absolutely nothing could get in their way. All they have to do is get to the moon first. The Metacore had the same idea. Getting to the moon meant getting cyanium. Getting cyanium meant that nothing could rule over them, and meant that the Mansion People wouldn't have it. The Mansion People dedicated to using their newly constructed missiles as anti-air weapons to prevent anyone leaving except for them. As much as the Metacore wanted to fight, it would be too risky due to having the Mansion People missiles against them. Many other places made rockets of their own, but not everyone wanted to get cyanium. Most just desperately needed to escape. The nightclub was converted into a ship, having locals aboard to escape from the madness. Construction City had finally become entirely complete, thus the new name, Complete City. They even converted one of their buildings into a space shuttle to escape. Pufferfish Land developed multiple escape ships of their own. The ships were named Puffer Pods and would hold residents near Pufferfish Land for an escape. No fights broke out, so the tension on the island didn't drop even a little. On a separate note, Wild Wonderland collapsed during renovations. The area below was an ancient city built on top of small volcanic grounds, so when the park toppled over, lava bursted out. This fact wasn't helped either by the volcanic biome from the Wild Wonderland having its pipage broken, further increasing the lava in the area. The air was tense. Suddenly, after days of nothing, the nightclub rocket launched, taking their chances of escape. The Mansion People held up their word and launched 2 missiles at the ship, destroying the nightclub and causing it to crash right through the side of the Complete City Capital Tower. Nobody else dared to leave, except for the bold Metacore. Their rockets all launched at once, leaving the missiles to have to choose which ship they take down. The Mansion People launched a fleet of missiles straight towards the ships. The Metacore ships activated their anti-missile systems, but 2 of the ships were struck before they could even fight back. One ship crashed nearby in a plains biome. The other crashed in the northern mountains where the old Metacore headquarters resided. The Metacore panicked. 2 ships remained. They successfully destroyed the missiles targeted at them and charged into the sky, but something was wrong. The ships both shut off their rockets. The Mansion People had hacked into their ships from spies aboard the ships. Luckily, the backup systems activated, bringing the thrusters back online, but it was already too late. Missiles struck the final 2 ships, sending them to crash back onto the island. The Metacore had lost for good. The Mansion People had no threats left. It was time. The thrusters below the renovated castle ship activated. The ship started to climb into the sky, faster and faster. The Mansion People would pursue greatness and reign as victorious rulers. The system picked up a high energy nearby. Right next to the ship was a gleam of purple. John Carter pushed his crew out of the way to see for himself. John squinted, looking closer. The gleam flashed abruptly, obliterating the ship with a shockwave in an instant. A fiery inferno rained from the devastation of the castle ship. The purple gleam broke a tear through the space-time fabric of the reality, killing the entirety of the mansion people in the process. The reality was being torn open somehow. The people of the island couldn't be more happy that the mansion people's reign was over, but couldn't be more terrified from what the tear in the sky was. But most people assured themselves that whatever next wouldn't be as bad as what they had faced the past few years. The Zephyans awaited for what they would face next, preparing for the worst. Some people were walking near the old mansion base when they noted something. The massive being that was trapped under the ice now started to move. Very subtle movements in the right arm of the being started to occur. Slowly, ice started to crack. The people looked closer. The right arm punched through the ice above it, lifting right into the air. The arm was massive, yet artificial looking. Suddenly, there was an intense flash of light. The tear sent one last shockwave over the island, ripping a gust of strong winds over. Up in the sky, lightning striking haphazardly, wind whipping around, the sky darker than ever. Then, there it was. The remains of the island of Azarka from the Treq universe. The islands were falling through the tear in reality, striking the ground with powerful force, destroying anything below. Most Kradons survived from the crashing, but not many Zephyans did. As the last few chunks of land crashed on the island, the rip of the space fabric in the sky sealed away. The being that had been trapped under the ice broke free. He looked identical to Leroy, but his color was orange instead of green. His name was Zeroy. Zeroy looked around, seeing destruction everywhere. Oddly enough, this seemed expected to him. Zeroy ran towards the Zader mothership, dropping a piece of paper that was in his grasp. The paper listed Leroy's ultimate plan that he had all along. I am just like you, Zeroy. We are no different from each other besides very few things. I am Leroy, your Treq universe counterpart. I've been banished by the god of my universe to a different dimension named Trax. The people of the island I am on are attempting to bring him back to save them. They have created an object they call the Scarlet Pyramid, in order to transport him back from the universe I sent him to. But this made me think. These people created an object capable of storing enough energy to transport things across dimensions. At this rate, what would they make of the Scarlet Pyramid? A weapon of incredible destruction? An object of unending energy? If there was only one way for me to access a more advanced Scarlet Pyramid, my body would allow me to absorb the energy within it to evolve to a higher being. You have not yet discovered the incredible power of interdimensional travel yet. Though this has saved you from much trouble, you have also blinded yourself from an overarching truth. Everything you know has a parallel and equal version of itself for every single universe, just like you and me. This led me to think that if the Scarlet Pyramid exists in this universe, there is a parallel version of an even more advanced Scarlet Pyramid in a different universe. I've found that such thing does exist, and it is contained in your universe. It's called the Violet Pyramid. It had shown signs of being the strongest version of these pyramids out of all the dimensions I've searched through. If the small chance where I am unable to attain this Violet Pyramid arises, I want you to absorb the Violet Pyramid for yourself. In exchange for this information I give to you, I want you to finish off what I have started if I am unable to myself. I entrust you to help carry out my plan. Attached to the paper was another paper written by Leroy to describe to Zeroy exactly how he could travel interdimensionally. Zeroy had been taught of the existence of the Violet Pyramid and the power of interdimensional travel because of the geniusness of Leroy. Now all that was left for him was to absorb the Violet Pyramid and follow through with his part of Leroy's deal, to finish what Leroy started. The Kradons constructed a railroad around the entire center of the island, having tunnels dug through the crashed Treq islands. This transportation allowed them to help transport those that were injured or to evacuate areas in case of emergency. The population of the island was roughly 75% Kradons and 25% Zephians. Both the Kradons and Zephians were mourning the destruction of their beloved islands, but could not waste any time. Something terrible was coming, and they had to prepare as best as they could. Lord Voldir was searching for Zeroy. Somehow he already knew that Zeroy was up to something terrible. He suddenly found him, standing with the Violet Pyramid in his grasp. Without hesitating, Voldir charged straight for Zeroy. Purple lightning struck around Zeroy's orange body. The pyramid vibrates with energy, sparking and sending bolts of violet energy haphazardly. Voldir charged his fist right into the face of Zeroy when suddenly everything went bright. Voldir looked up at his fist. His hand was cracked, and Zeroy's face didn't even have a mark on it. Zeroy had become entirely purple. The power of the Violet Pyramid resonated through his chest. Pulses of light shined through the cracks left behind where the pyramid was struck. Voldir slowly lowered his arm and backed away from Zeroy. A tear dripped down his cold, stone face. Zeroy raised his purple arm, gently placing his hand on top of Voldir's head. In a moment, the stone head of Voldir was crushed, his body limply falling to the ground. Every single universe that exists is maintained by a designated god for that dimension. For the Treq universe, it was Voldir. But what would happen if the god were to be killed? No universe could ever be godless. So the one that kills the god becomes the new god of that dimension. For Zeroy's case, killing Voldir now deems him as the new god of the Treq universe, giving him the abilities of a god, such as flight, unaging, extreme strength, and to prevent a specific being from teleporting to a different dimension. Zeroy charged towards the people on the island, butchering them like they were mere insects. Zeroy had single-handedly created one of the largest slaughterings in history for Kradons and Zephians alike. Few found refuge from Zeroy, but then another problem arose. All that were killed by Zeroy began to stand back up. The sheer energy from Zeroy was enough to bring back those that he killed to life, but they weren't the same they were before. They came back, growing large and disgusting. They were much larger in size, some being 10 feet tall and much stronger. They could barely even be called people anymore due to their horrible and foul appearance. They were named by the survivors to be monstrosities. The survivors all began hiding out in the ruins of the island, having to defend themselves against monstrosities. Zeroy was going around the island, searching every place for any people. The Kradons and Zephians got along quickly. The Zephians would introduce the Kradons to their home, or what was left of it. The island was full of Zephians just prior to when the Kradons arrived. Zeroy had cleared almost every hiding spot. The Kradons suddenly had an idea that their best and only way to fight against the forces of Zeroy: Cap Industries, the factory that was transported on a chunk of land from Ozarka. The factory used to be the best funded company for the Kradons. It would make weapons that would shoot caps at deadly speeds. Even some certain caps could be flicked at deadly speeds as well. This would be perfect for the survivors. They set up a base at the abandoned factory and gathered all the weapons they could find. The monstrosities that would fight back were no match to the forces of the cap weapons. But with how quickly the survivors were being killed off, they would surely run out of soldiers to fight against Zeroy. They then started to recycle the factory and reconstruct the machines within it to create robots to provide manpower for the survivors. These robots were extremely powerful, even capable of taking out multiple monstrosities at a time. The people created a leader for the robotic soldiers. His name was Ticklebot. Supplies were running low for the survivors in Cap Industries. They were left with two options: die hiding from Zeroy or fight back and die trying. Taking down Zeroy would require more manpower than they had, especially against the monstrosities that Zeroy has made a part of his army. Their best chance at winning the war would be to hinder Zeroy's power by taking down his army of monstrosities, but doing this meant for a large-scale plan. Due to the population having to evacuate so frequently, most of the people lived near the railroad around the center of the island for easy and quick escapes if necessary. Since there is an abundance of people here, monstrosities are attracted to the railroad as well, making this area to be home to the largest population of both people and monstrosities. Ticklebot devised a plan to take down the monstrosities using the railroad system. The train there could easily be fortified and rigged with weapons, so when traveling through the railroad, they could kill every monstrosity that they see. If the plan succeeds, they kill a vast majority of Zero's monstrosities, leaving him outnumbered against the people. The train was finally fully prepared for war. There were sturdy defenses built around the whole of the train, along with deadly guns mounted through the windows and the sides of it. The people were ready to finally begin taking back the island. The train slowly started moving, grabbing the attention of surrounding monstrosities. As the beasts started approaching the train, bullets whizzed by, striking the monsters and killing them one by one. The train was picking up speed, but so were the monstrosities. The train was moving at its top speeds, and hordes of monstrosities were chasing it down. The train, rattling the railroad as it flew along, was too fast for the monstrosities to attack it, finally giving the people their advantage they craved for. The beasts were falling dead all around them, until suddenly this train screeched on the tracks. Zeroy had arrived and crashed on top of one of the rail cars behind the train. Some people jumped out of the train, knowing they would have to face the monstrosities, but it may have just given them a higher chance of survival than what Zeroy had planned. Zeroy flew up and charged alongside the train. Just when Zeroy was flying next to the engine of the train, he swerved and bashed into the train, knocking it completely off its railroad tracks. The train skidded along the ground for a while, until coming to a stop. The people inside were injured, but not dead yet. Zeroy landed gently at the crash site of the train. He looked around at the people, then started charging towards them. Suddenly, Zeroy was knocked off the ground by someone. He looks up to see a large robot flying above him. Ticklebot was hovering in place with several rocket boosters. Ticklebot, the leader of the Kraton and Zephian robot army, was by far the strongest robot that they had ever made. But with all of his strength, even Ticklebot himself was unsure if he could fight a god. But there was nothing else he could do but try. Ticklebot pummeled Zeroy into the ground further. Each punch had rockets behind it to make them as strong as they could be. Zeroy swung Ticklebot off of him and then flew up. His body was slightly dented with very minor scratches, but it was still the most damage anyone has ever seen Zeroy take. Zeroy slowly flies closer to Ticklebot. A cap hits Zeroy's leg. He turns around to see someone with their cap gun pointed at him. Another cat hits him. He turns around to see another person that shot at him. Then another cap hit him. And another. Before he knew it, he was getting barraged with caps from all directions. The Kratons, Zephians, the Ticklebot's robot army were all firing at Zeroy. While Zeroy was getting bombarded by caps, Ticklebot took his advantage and struck Zeroy across the face. He quickly got out of the way, just to come back and strike him once more. Zeroy was too disoriented to be able to fight back, leaving him vulnerable in this moment. Ticklebot went in for another hit. As his fist reached out to hit him, Zeroy quickly snatched Ticklebot's arm and aggressively flung him into the ground in front of him. This caught everyone off guard, giving Zeroy a moment from being barraged by caps. He took up the moment and flew right down on Ticklebot. He jabbed Ticklebot with his left arm, followed by his right, and then his left again, and kept punching faster and faster. Sparks shot out of Ticklebot's face, but Zeroy didn't hinder. The barrage of gunfire started once more, and Zeroy charged into the crowd of people. He went from person to person, punching them right through their chests. Before he could even think, Ticklebot somehow got up and flew right into Zeroy, sending him right into the wreck of the derailed train. Zeroy was amazed that Ticklebot was still alive, but was clearly getting frustrated with his perseverance. Zeroy got up, grabbed the train car that he crashed into, and lifted it into the air. The car was immensely heavy, but Zeroy managed to throw it right back at Ticklebot, knocking him into the ground and trapping him underneath. Zeroy walked over, seeing Ticklebot's bottom half stuck under the train. Zeroy lifts his foot and swiftly crushes Ticklebot's head in a stomp. The glowing lights on his body faded away as he went limp. During this fight, many were able to escape, but those that were too late perished to the wrath of Zeroy. Many were lost to the train fight in the previous year. Ticklebot, though brave, was very short-lived. He sacrificed himself to give time for the others to escape. Ultimately, nobody could fully decide whether the fight was a success or not. They managed to take down many monstrosities and slightly damage Zeroy, but in turn, for their own people and Ticklebot, just may not have been worth it. Through the year, after the Battle of the Train, the people have been preparing to give their all in one final and ultimate battle. They would either come out victorious or dead. No other option was left.
Tanks nearly the size of buildings were prepared, along with the ever-expanding robot army. To serve in place of Ticklebot, they created a potentially even stronger robot known as Hiccupbot. He was much bulkier in size, making him slower, but much more fortified. Hiccupbot would serve as commander of the robot army in place of Ticklebot. The day had come. It was time to take back the island and to finish off Zeroy. On the southern end of the island, the tanks began to roll out. Zeroy's monstrosities stood no chance against the massive tanks. Each bullet shot from a tank left craters in the ground, instantly killing any monstrosities in its path. Hiccupbot led his army and hundreds of robots, all taking steps in synchronization. They shook the ground they marched on and took down tons of monstrosities that came by. It was clear that Zeroy's monstrosities were losing this fight. The technological advancements that the people had made in preparation for this final fight was much more than Zeroy anticipated. Finally, Zeroy flew out above the battleground. He watched explosions scattered about, seeing the deaths of his enemies, but mostly the deaths of his own monstrosities. He flew down towards a crowd of people, crashing and leaving a crater behind. The survivors from the attack fought back, but Zeroy didn't flinch. He kept marching forward and killing. The robot army arrived to intervene with Zeroy's destruction. Zeroy looked at the horizon, seeing it covered by mechanical soldiers, all led by one larger machine. Hiccupbot stood tall in front of his men, pointing slowly at Zeroy. A wave of caps covered the sky, all coming from the robotic army. The caps were coming straight down towards Zeroy. He looked around for cover, but none was there. Suddenly, a tank from the distance shot a shell right towards Zeroy. He floated up slowly, watching the surge of caps close in on him, while focusing on the tank shell charging right at him. He suddenly and gracefully dodged around the shell as it was about to strike him, gripping the sides of it. Zeroy had averted the tank's shell explosion by catching it. He then twisted and threw the shell up into the wave of caps above him. When the caps hit the shell, it exploded, sending the caps everywhere, but they were originally targeted. The devastation from the wave of the caps killed many of the people and robotic soldiers, but they kept pushing. One failed attack on Zeroy wasn't enough to stop the pursuit for victory. Zeroy flew through the crowds of people and robots, killing them as he went through. But as time went on and more were being killed, many people started to run for their lives. Zeroy was not slowing, and Hiccupbot couldn't bear to watch any more die. Zeroy suddenly got slammed into the ground. He looked up to see Hiccupbot flying there, almost exactly like how Ticklebot did that last year. Zeroy bolted right back up, smashing his fists into Hiccupbot's metal body. The robot was much stronger than Ticklebot, but even still received heavy damage from Zeroy's utter strength. The two dueled, flying around the sky and exchanging barrages of punches and hits. Meanwhile, the people were suffering from Zeroy's attacks on them. Many succumbed to their injuries, and others died on the spot. The Kraton and Zephian population was shrinking shorter and shorter by the minute. Zeroy suddenly struck Hiccupbot with a brutal attack, sending him straight into the ground. The robotic army rushed to help fix him. Hiccupbot was immensely damaged, while Zeroy floated in the sky with few scratches and dents. Before any repairs could even be made, Zeroy flew down and crashed right where Hiccupbot rested. Zeroy gripped the robot's arm and ripped it cleanly off. Hiccupbot screamed in agony, and Zeroy grabbed his other arm. Zeroy continued to rip off Hiccupbot piece by piece. Sparks shot through the air and robotic screams echoed. Eventually, the screams stopped. Zeroy slowly stood back up and turned around. He was completely surrounded by absolutely massive tanks. He floated up and bolted right through the hull of one of the tanks. The other tanks fired at the one Zeroy was inside, but the armor on the tank was seemingly just too strong to penetrate with their own tank shells. The tank Zeroy was inside of slowly started to rise in the air. Zeroy's below it, lifting the giant, building-sized tank into the air. He then hurled it at another tank, crashing the two into each other and causing the ground-shaking explosion. Zeroy continued flying around, picking up debris and launching it at people. He continued taking out every tank by breaking inside and hurling it wherever he wanted. Zeroy killed and killed, never slowing for anything. The people had no choice but to surrender and run for their lives. Hiccupbot was dead, and the robotic army was shortened immensely. The population of people had never been so small, and Zeroy had never made so many monstrosities before. The end truly had come for the people. The robotic army was completely killed, and all due to the sheer amount of monstrosities and from Zeroy himself. There were only about 94 Kratons and 33 Zephians left. All of them were hiding for their life. Zeroy slowly checked around every corner, finding ones that were hiding from him still. If Zeroy didn't find a group of hiders, the monstrosities eventually would. One by one, every single person perished by the hands of Zeroy and his monstrosities. Every single person was dead. Cratons and Zephyans, all extinct. The island was silent, once filled with hope, now completely hopeless. Nobody survived. Not one. Zeroy and his monstrosities were the ones on the island now. Zeroy had fulfilled his end of the deal with Leroy. Although Leroy was completely gone, his influence carried through Zeroy's actions. Perhaps Leroy was the one that was victorious after all. 2 years pass. Zeroy completely perfects the ways of Leroy's interdimensional travel. He creates a massive portal in the center of the island, leading to an alternate universe, the Treq universe. Since he was now the god of that universe, it would only make sense for him to go there and rule over the dimension. Zeroy flew through the portal and left the island for the monstrosities.